Hello, friends. My name is Pastor Rich Neal with St. Timothy Lutheran Church in Grand Island, New York. And I'm here to welcome you today to a new five-part series we're beginning called Teach Us to Pray. We've been praying as Christians since we've been Christians, but sometimes the styles of prayer we use are not as fulfilling and not as rewarding as we'd like them to be. So we're going to approach prayer from a new dimension or a new direction in this series. And we want to try to coax out of us an inner light, a kind of familiarity and an experience of the richness of life that Jesus said he came to offer. I want to begin today by reading a short passage from the introduction to John O'Donohue's book, To Bless the Space Between Us. It's a contemporary collection of blessings and prayers from the Celtic tradition. And I share these opening lines with you to kind of give us a thought ahead about what we're going to be hoping for in this series. He begins his introduction this way. There's a quiet light that shines in every heart. It draws no attention to itself, though it is always secretly there. It's what illuminates our minds to see beauty, our desire to seek possibility, our hearts to love life. Without this subtle quickening, our days would be empty and wearisome, and no horizon would ever awaken our longing. Our passion for life is quietly sustained from somewhere in us that's wedded to the energy and excitement of life. This shy inner light is what enables us to recognize and receive our very presence here as blessing. Receiving our very presence as blessing, coaxing out that shy inner light that's within every one of us, is what this 5-week series is about. We're going to be learning to pray, perhaps in some new ways for you, using Scripture as our form and the substance of our prayer. It's one of the oldest forms of prayer we have in the Christian faith. And I'm going to introduce to you in this series 5 different ways of praying the Scripture. There's a basic way that we'll begin with this week. And then there are 4 variations of that form that we'll introduce in the weeks ahead. The prophet Jeremiah said, describing that time when he had really encountered Scripture for the first time and when it enlivened him and coaxed out of him that inner light, he wrote, "When I found your words, I devoured them, and they became to me a joy and my heart's delight." Well, I hope that will be your experience as well in this series, that you'll find the Scriptures to be a joy and the absolute delight of your heart. And you'll find your prayer with Scripture speaks to you and speaks for you to God more authentically as you develop more familiarity with these styles of prayer. Each week we're going to do 4 things essentially. One is I'll provide this short video introduction that will introduce you to one new style of prayer or variation of the style we've been using. There'll be a printed description of that style that you're welcome to download and keep with you. Once a week on Wednesday at 7 o'clock, we'll meet with some others who are going through this series also. 7 o'clock on Wednesdays at a Zoom meeting to discuss our experience, ask questions, and seek new direction or new insight into what we've been learning. And then there'll be a video introducing the new variation of prayer that's coming up in the week ahead. Now, what's unique to this series is our use of a personality profile that helps us match our style of prayer with our own personality more effectively. We'll be using as our guide the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. And if you haven't done that, taken that profile, you will have a very simple 15 or 20-minute version of that you can use to chart your profile according to the Myers-Briggs type indicator. You can do that either on paper, which we'll provide for you online, or you can do it online at at a site called keirsey.com, KEIRSEY.com. You'll be seeing more about that later. Either way, you'll get a brief thumbnail sketch of the personality that may be best suited to one of the prayer styles we're using. What we're going to begin with this week, and we'll discuss this more at our meeting on this coming Wednesday, is a style of prayer called Benedictine style. It's just a very basic style of praying the scripture. I'm going to pull out my description so I can share it with you. A very basic style of praying the scripture that involves a 4-step reading of the scripture. First of all, you'll be invited just to set aside some passage of scripture that you want to pray with. It's helpful to choose this in advance so you have it at hand when you begin your time of prayer. And find a quiet place to sit and relax. Let your heart and your mind stop, slow down, and be at rest. Make sure you're free of distractions, that the noise from the rest of the house or wherever you are is not too distracting for you. And then, as with all the other types of prayer that we'll be discussing in this series, we want you to spend several moments reading through that passage of scripture. Read it slowly and reflectively. Pause where you feel drawn to give attention to one particular word or phrase. Let it work with you, and read it often enough, 3 or 4 or 5 times perhaps, so that you really get familiar with its pace and its cadence and its rhythms and its content, so that it can speak to you without having you too closely attached to the paper. And the first step in the reading is just that. It's called the sacred reading, the reading itself of scripture as you read through that several times. Sometimes it may help you to read the text aloud, especially if you're in a quiet room. You can do that without being self-conscious. Read it aloud and you get a different experience of that scripture. After you've got it in you really well, then the next step is the meditation on the scripture, where you simply let it steep in you like a tea bag in a cup of hot water. You might try to personalize it, develop a more personal relationship with what it says, perhaps thinking of it as speaking to you directly instead of to the church at large. Perhaps during your reflection, your meditation on the scripture, you might want to go back and read it again. Perhaps you're drawn to one word or phrase that's new to you this time that you hadn't thought of before. But just spend a few minutes reflecting on the scripture. Let it work within you. The third stage of prayer with scripture is actually called prayer. It's where we begin to address our concerns and our responses and our feelings and our needs to God. What's prompted in us by the reading and encounter with the scripture? Turn that into whatever kind of prayer you may want. It could be a verbal prayer. It could be a written prayer if you are accustomed to journaling. It could be more thoughtful, quiet prayer just within yourself. But however you're accustomed to praying, spend a little time then praying about what arises for you in the scripture reading. And then finally, the fourth step is contemplation. After you've had your prayer time, simply sit in the silence and let yourself rest in what's happened. You might want to give thanks for what God has done with you or spoken to you in the prayer time. You might want to simply sit and reflect on whatever new things come to mind. Don't rush right into a task list for what you might be doing next. But let the scripture work with you, just as you sit with it, like you sit with a friend at the end of a long and deep and enriching conversation. To help you with this, there's a printed version of this description that will be available to you online, and I ask you simply to download that and print it. You keep it with you. Also, you may find some challenges in finding scripture that's suitable for prayer. So I'm going to provide also online a resource for you that I think will be helpful. It's a booklet, a small booklet called Teach Us, or Themes for Prayer. Themes for Prayer. There are 13 different themes here. Subjects for prayer, things you might be wanting to pray about. And then there are some suggested scripture readings and some alternatives, some supplementary readings for each one of those themes. It's 15 pages long. There are 13 themes of prayer here. And you're welcome to take that with you and use that not only during the extent of this course, but throughout your study and your prayer life. Well, that's all for today. Do come on with us for the meeting we have on Zoom on Wednesday at 7 o'clock. You'll find the link there to that meeting on our website. You're invited to come and participate or simply listen in or share questions and observations and insights that you may have. And then watch for the other weeks as they come up once a week for the next 4 weeks after this coming one. We hope you have a rich experience with this, that it proves worthwhile for you, and that inner life, that joy of living that is latent, present in each one of us, has an opportunity to come out and express itself and solve your worries, salve your conscience, support your joy and your appreciation of life. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining us today.